The figure glowing on Marcus's screen crossed $1 million for the very first time in his life. His wife's reaction. She asked if he'd remembered to take the chicken out of the freezer. 30 years. 3 full decades of saving pointed at this single instant, and it landed feeling exactly like every other Tuesday. There were no fireworks, no champagne corks popping, no black cards sliding across a marble counter. Just 2 people in their 50s standing in a kitchen with laminate countertops. One of them was now, technically, a millionaire. Both of them were thinking about what to make for dinner. I'm Root, and I've spent an unreasonable amount of time studying the exact moment people cross this particular line, because almost nobody tells you the truth about what actually waits on the other side of it. So here's the question sitting underneath this whole video: if Marcus is a millionaire now, why doesn't a single part of his life feel like that word is supposed to feel? Hit like and let's dig in. Here's the thing about the word millionaire. For roughly 100 years, it was the finish line, the yacht, the private island, the guy lighting a cigar with a $100 bill. Your grandparents heard millionaire and pictured an entirely different species of human being. That image is still burned into our collective brain, and that's exactly the problem, because the number stopped matching the picture a long time ago. Let's run some numbers that might dent the fantasy a little. $1 today doesn't buy what $1 bought a couple decades back. Nobody's shocked by that. But work the actual figures and it gets uncomfortable fast. $1 million in 2026 has roughly the purchasing power that $514,000 had in the year 2000. Go back further, to 1980, and today's $1 million buys about what $246,000 bought back then. So when your uncle talks about millionaires like they're royalty, he's remembering a version of the word from an era when $1 million could buy roughly 4 times what it buys today. The word never changed. The math underneath it quietly did. And the culture already knows this, even if nobody says it out loud, because here's a figure that should stop you cold. When you actually ask Americans how much money it takes to be considered wealthy, the answer isn't $1 million. It's $2.3 million. That's the current asking price on the fantasy, and it's more than double the number Marcus just hit. The finish line your grandparents worshipped is now, by today's own standards, less than half of what it actually takes to feel rich. Marcus crossed a line the culture moved decades ago and simply forgot to tell him about. He won the race, and somebody quietly moved the trophy. So what does $1 million actually do for you? Not how does it feel, but what does it mechanically produce? This is where people get genuinely surprised. There's a classic guideline called the 4% rule. You withdraw 4% of your portfolio in year 1 of retirement, then adjust that amount for inflation every year after, and historically that gives you very good odds of not running out of money over a 30-year retirement. 4% of $1 million is $40,000 a year. That's it, that's the income $1 million produces. The man who originally created that rule recently revised it upward, suggesting you could push closer to 4.7%, which would put Marcus at about $47,000 a year. Other researchers, looking at today's pricier markets, think the safer number might actually be closer to 3.7%, or roughly $37,000. Let's just split the difference and be generous. Marcus's $1 million, the number he chased for 30 years, throws off something close to an ordinary, unremarkable American salary. He's a millionaire who, if he stops working, gets to live on roughly what a mid-career manager earns. Nobody puts that on a vision board. I want you to actually sit with what that feels like, because $40 something thousand a year is a real budget with real edges. It still means checking the total on the screen before tapping your card at the grocery store. It still means deciding the trip to see the grandkids happens once this year instead of twice, because flights got expensive and math is math. Being a millionaire in this scenario doesn't mean prices stop matching. It means you crossed the finish line and discovered the finish line comes with a mortgage payment. The anxiety doesn't disappear, it just changes shape, from, will I ever have enough, to, please don't let me lose what I built. And it gets rougher, because that income isn't landing in a vacuum, it's landing inside a body that's aging. One of the single biggest expenses waiting for Marcus and Diane isn't a boat. It's healthcare. The current estimate for what a 65-year-old couple retiring today will spend on healthcare for the rest of their lives, and this doesn't even include long-term care, is around $345,000. So a big, ugly slice of that hard-earned million has already been claimed by a future version of Marcus who has bad knees and takes 4 different medications. That million was never fully his. It came with a bill attached. But the income issue isn't even the strangest part. Here's the piece that genuinely breaks people's brains once they see it: being a millionaire on paper and actually having $1 million to spend are 2 completely different universes. When we say Marcus has a net worth of $1 million, we're adding up everything he owns and subtracting what he owes. For a typical American who hits this milestone, most of that net worth sits in 2 places: the equity in the house he lives in, and retirement accounts he legally can't fully touch yet. Think about what that actually means. You can't spend your house. You can sell it, sure, but then you need somewhere else to live, and that somewhere else also costs money. And money sitting in a traditional retirement account isn't just cash in a drawer. If Marcus tries to pull it out before age 59 and a half, penalties and taxes take a machete to the balance. So here's a man who is, on paper, a millionaire, and if his water heater explodes next Tuesday, he might genuinely have to think hard about whether he can cover it. That's not a contradiction, that's the completely normal, standard issue reality of what this milestone looks like. Want to see how deep this goes? Look at the numbers for the entire country. The median American household net worth, including home equity, sits around $193,000. Strip out the equity in the home, just the roof over people's heads, and that median collapses to something like $58,000. Most of what Americans own is a house they're living inside of and can't eat. So when Marcus looks at his $1 million number, then looks at his actual bank balance and feels a confusing gap between the two, he isn't crazy. The number is real. It's just mostly locked inside a vault he doesn't have the keys to yet, like being told you own a gold mine and also that you're not allowed inside it. And when he finally does get inside, somebody's waiting for him. Because here's the next thing nobody puts in the Millionaire brochure: that retirement account, the big beautiful one with the 7-figure balance, has had a silent business partner on it the entire time: the government. If Marcus's million sits inside a traditional pre-tax retirement account, that isn't really $1 million. It's $1 million minus every bit of income tax he never paid going in. When he withdraws that money in retirement, it gets taxed as ordinary income, federal and often state too. Depending on where he lives and how he takes it, that $1 million balance might really be worth somewhere around $700,000 in actual, spendable, in his pocket dollars. And this partner isn't patient either. This is a partner who never showed up to a single meeting, never contributed a dollar, never once asked how Marcus's day was going, and then strolls in at the end demanding a cut of everything. Once Marcus turns 73, this partner stops letting him decide when to withdraw at all. There's a rule called the required minimum distribution that forces him to pull out a chunk every single year whether he wants to or not, specifically so it can finally get taxed. In year 1, on $1 million balance, that forced withdrawal is roughly $37,700, dragged into the daylight whether he's ready or not. Marcus spent decades thinking of that account as his. It was always quietly a little bit theirs too. The statement said $1 million. The fine print said $1 million, terms and conditions apply. At this point you might be picturing the person who reaches this milestone as some flashy high roller who gamed the system, and this is where the picture needs a total rearrange, because the real millionaire looks nothing like the commercial. When researchers study thousands of people with $1 million net worth, the profile that comes back is almost aggressively boring. The most common careers aren't hedge fund manager or crypto founder, they're engineer, accountant, teacher, manager, regular jobs. The vast majority never inherited any meaningful money. Most never even earned a 6-figure salary in a typical year. They just did one incredibly unsexy thing for an incredibly long time: they saved a chunk of every paycheck, put it into boring index funds, and waited about 26 years. That's Marcus, a high school chemistry teacher for 3 decades. Diane, an engineer. They drove a Camry until the Camry died of old age, then bought a slightly newer used Camry. By every visible measure, they're the most middle-class looking people on their street. Then there's Greg, 2 doors down. Greg has the leased German SUV, the boat he uses twice a year, the watch that cost more than Marcus's first car, and the kind of lawn that requires a guy. Greg looks about 10 times richer than Marcus. Greg is also, and this cannot be stressed enough, probably one slow month at work away from the whole thing collapsing like a Jenga tower in a mild breeze. Because here's the thing the research keeps confirming, the people who look rich and the people who are rich are very often not the same people. Wealth is quiet. It's the stuff you don't see, the car that isn't in the driveway, the vacation that never got posted, the watch nobody's wearing. Getting there is brutal, especially at the start, which is the part that makes people quit. There's a well-known line from investor Charlie Munger, who said that the first $100,000 is a nightmare, but you have to get through it. And he's right, the math backs him up. At the beginning, your money grows almost entirely because you keep feeding it, not because it's earning much on its own. It feels like pushing a boulder up a hill with your bare hands. But once the pile gets big enough, growth on the pile starts outrunning what you're adding, and the boulder starts rolling on its own. Most people never get to feel that, because they quit while they're still pushing. Marcus didn't quit. That's the entire secret, and it's almost insulting how simple it is. But here's a wrinkle, because a lot of people don't just quit, they actively sabotage the thing. Decades of investor data show that the average person earns dramatically less than the funds they're invested in, and not because the funds performed badly. It's because people panic sell at the bottom, pile in at the top, and tinker constantly. Over a long stretch, the average investor ends up with less than half of what they'd have had if they'd simply bought a boring index fund and never touched it again. Marcus's superpower wasn't picking winners. It was doing absolutely nothing, on purpose, for 30 years straight. He got rich by being the most patient, least interesting man at the party. Now, some of you are probably a little annoyed right now, thinking, come on, $1 million is still $1 million, most people never get close. And you're right, completely right, and that shouldn't get lost here. $1 million net worth still puts Marcus in roughly the top 10 to 15% of American households. That's a genuine achievement most people never reach. But here's the part that reframes everything: to actually crack the top 1%, the level people picture when they daydream about being rich, Marcus would need to grow his money more than 10 times over. The distance from broke to millionaire is enormous. The distance from millionaire to actually rich is a canyon most millionaires never cross. He's not standing on top of the mountain. He's at a very nice rest stop with a good view, catching his breath. There's one more quiet disappointment tucked inside that number, especially for anyone hoping to pass something on. $1 million for most people who reach it isn't generational wealth. It's barely one generation's worth of wealth. Run the tape forward, subtract the taxes, subtract the 6-figure healthcare bill, subtract 30 years of a couple actually living off the thing. What's usually left at the end isn't a dynasty, it's a paid-off house and whatever didn't get spent. That's a real gift, nobody's knocking it, but the fantasy where hitting $1 million sets your grandkids up for life forever was never $1 million fantasy. That number starts a couple of zeros further down the road, which is an uncomfortable thing to learn after you've already run the whole race. And this is where it gets almost sad, because even standing at that nice rest stop, most people who make it don't feel any of it. When you survey actual millionaires and ask if they consider themselves wealthy, the overwhelming majority say no. Only around 8% of people with $1 million in investable assets will call themselves wealthy. Most say they're middle class or upper middle class. Let that sit for a second. The thing you're chasing, the number, the milestone, the finish line, the people who already crossed it are standing there telling you it doesn't feel like crossing anything. Why doesn't it land? Part of it is everything already covered, the money is locked up, taxed, and inflated away. But part of it is simply how the human brain works, and this is the trap that catches absolutely everyone. Your sense of enough isn't a fixed point. It moves. The second you hit a number, that number becomes your new baseline, your new floor, and your eyes drift up toward the next one. When Marcus made $40,000 a year, $100,000 looked like total freedom. Once he made $100,000, he started noticing the people making $250,000. There's no amount of money where the brain finally exhales and says, "Great, we're done, we can relax now." The goalpost isn't at the end of the field. The goalpost is bolted to your own forehead, and it moves every single time you do. This isn't a video about rich people, because that treadmill, you're already on it too. If you make $40,000 right now, some version of you is convinced that $70,000 would fix everything. Make $70,000, and you start eyeing the people at $120,000. The millionaire staring at his balance, feeling vaguely unsatisfied, isn't a different creature from you. He's you, further up the same treadmill, discovering the belt keeps speeding up no matter how far he runs. Marcus isn't chasing a number anymore. He's been quietly drafted into chasing the feeling the number was supposed to give him, and that feeling turns out to be permanently sold out. Which, honestly, is the whole reason I built the thing I run now. If the number can't give you the feeling, the next best move is to stop white-knuckling a single paycheck and actually understand the machine underneath all of this. That's why I put together a community where I walk people through, step by step, how I built faceless YouTube channels like this one into real income, in an economy that feels rigged against just saving your way out. No hype, no guru posing in front of a rented Lamborghini, just the actual playbook. Links are in the description if you want in, and we'd genuinely be glad to have you. Anyway, back to Marcus, because here's where I want to leave you, and it's not where you'd expect. None of this means the milestone is worthless. Marcus and Diane are genuinely fine. They have a paid-off house, income for life, and they will never lie awake doing the truly terrifying kind of math. That's not nothing, that's actually enormous. The mistake was never in reaching the million. The mistake was in what we were told the million would feel like. We were promised a fireworks show and handed a quiet kind of freedom instead, and because we were all watching the sky for explosions, most of us don't even notice the freedom when it finally shows up. A couple of weeks after the number crossed 1 million, Marcus was standing in his driveway on a Saturday, watching Diane back the 10-year-old Camry out to go get groceries. Same car, same cracked concrete he keeps meaning to fix. 2 doors down, Greg was loading the boat onto the trailer again, phone wedged against his shoulder, arguing with someone about a payment. Marcus watched them both for a second, Greg, who looked like the millionaire, and Marcus, who actually was one. And that's when it finally hit him. Not at the laptop, not at the number, but right there, watching a used sedan pull out of a paid-off driveway while his neighbor wrestled with a boat he couldn't afford. The thing Marcus had spent 30 years chasing had already arrived. It just showed up so quietly he almost missed it, because it never once looked like the commercial. It looked like nothing. And it turns out nothing is a lot more than most people ever get. If any of this changed how you think about the number you're chasing, that community link is waiting for you down below. And a quick reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only, and what you do with your own money is entirely on you. I'll see you in the next one.